Hello COMS 532 classmates, this is Betsy Wampler. It's great to be with you today. I'm presenting on Chapter 14 of our text about ebooks. Please advance to the next slide. So what is an ebook? An ebook is an electronic digitized version of a printed book that's meant to be read on a computer, e-reader, or tablet. Please advance. So how did ebooks come about? Well, in the early 1970s, there was a man named Michael Hart who was an undergrad, and he thought books should be accessible to people. He saw the development of the computer as a way that this would become possible, and he started something called Project Gutenberg. He began typing up books and documents that were in the public domain and making them accessible to be read by computer. He started with the Declaration of Independence, advanced to the works of Mark Twain and Shakespeare, and by the time he died in 2011, after 40 years on this project, there were over 42,000 books for free reading or download through Project Gutenberg and over 100,000 titles through their online partners. What a visionary and what a great life's work. So who knows what some of you younger undergrads out there will do in the future as well. Please advance. By the 1980s, more people had computers and more people could be reading books online, but it still wasn't that popular. In the 1990s, a device developed specifically for reading books online was developed, and that was by the Sony Corporation. They came out with a device called the Sony Data Discman. Well, for those of you old enough to remember the Walkman for music, this was big stuff at the time, big technology advance. But again, they weren't that popular. Then through MIT came out a new technology called e-ink, and e-ink created a more paper-like real book reading experience, and so Sony then came out in 2006 with something called the Sony Reader. But again, not that popular. A year later, Amazon answered back and came out with the Kindle. Please advance to the next slide. This was the real first commercial success of an e-reader. So why was Amazon so successful when Sony hadn't been? Well, our book would suggest from Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 that pre-diffusion theory comes into play here, and a concept called the diffusion threshold. And this basically says that when when considering consumer adoption of a new technology, the diffusion threshold is the point at which all production and distribution functions for the hardware and software are served, and then wide distribution of the technology can begin. Well, because Amazon already had the market cornered for selling books online and for a good number of e-books online, they had the market and they could distribute it and market it better. So it didn't hurt, though, that in 2008, Oprah added the Kindle to her list of favorite things, a huge commercial bump. Please advance to the next slide. In addition to this, Kindle introduced something called specialized formatting, and that meant that Kindle books could only be read on a Kindle. So Barnes & Noble then came out with the Nook, their own specialized format. Their books could only be read on their device. Well, then Apple came out with the iPad, which is a multifunction tablet, and then they allowed apps to read the Kindle, and Kindle book formats, and apps to read the Nook book formats, and Android came out with their own tablet as well. So there's been sort of this e-reader war going on between all these providers. Please advance. This was a pretty interesting slide. If you can see that an iPad will read most of the e-technology formats, but Amazon's still staying tight, trying not to allow their format to be read, or they're not allowing their device to read a lot of other formats. There are calls for a universal format. Hard to say. They'll all keep fighting it out where money's concerned. But there's increasing availability of ebooks. Please advance. Other recent developments are that Kindle still dominates the e-reader market, but multifunction tablet sales are surpassing the sales of e-readers. Most devices still will support a variety of formats. Again, there's a war going on, and there are calls for a universal format. And there's increasing availability of ebooks. Most books, when they come out, will be automatically available for an e-reader. Please advance. I thought this was an interesting slide to show you that the rise of e-reading, use of and ownership of e-reading devices in the United States, they skyrocketed between 2010 and 2014 from just over 10 million to over 50 million people have e-reader devices. And of those that have just dedicated e-reader devices, the Kindle still holds the market. Nook is next, and look at poor Sony Reader down there with only 2%. So Kindle really blew it out. Please advance. Another trend is e-textbooks. It's a booming business. As most of us know, hard copy textbooks can be very expensive. And some complaints about e-textbooks have been that you couldn't make notes or highlight in the highlight or make notes in the margin, but current technology is addressing that. Many e-textbooks now have a capacity for letting you make notes on the page or highlight. Another complaint is that they can't be resold, but the cost of e-textbooks is so much lower that it's possible to really save money anyway. There are so many now open source, free, or low-cost textbooks, and this is a trend of the future. If you'll look at the projected growth, please advance to the next slide, you'll see the projected growth on sales of U.S. digital textbooks. In 2010, quite low, and then if you look at the projection into 2017, quite an advance. Please advance to the next slide. So some factors to watch are that there may be a universal format for ebooks that they can be read across all devices. There will be continued growth in the sales of e-readers and ebooks and e-textbooks, but there will be digital rights issues, how to protect intellectual property or the author's rights. There's some challenges, and there are legal battles among competitors. There are other legal issues. So there was a court case that started in about 2010 where Apple was sued for artificially keeping the cost of ebooks high. And this wound its way through the court. They kept getting found guilty, And in 2015, our textbook stopped at 2014. In 2015, Apple was found guilty by the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals of ebook price fixing and violating federal antitrust laws. Apple appealed, but in 2016, the United States Supreme Court declined to hear Apple's appeal. So I'm not sure that they can advance much further. Please advance to the next slide. I think ebooks are awesome. I love them. The e-readers are lightweight and handheld. They hold books, newspapers, and magazines. If you want to take 10 magazines to the beach, you can without lugging a giant heavy bag. They hold thousands of books. I know someone personally who says she has over 5,000 books on her Kindle device. I said, wow, you can't carry that many when you travel. And she travels quite a bit, so it really works for her. In addition, something else, it's easier to self-publish. Amazon now has a pretty streamlined system for people self-publishing ebooks. I know an attorney personally. He lives in the county next to me, and he is a good writer and has published several books through Amazon. He came to my daughter's school to speak about this and said that he now makes more money on the publication and sales of his ebooks than he does as an attorney. Pretty interesting. And the development and success of e-readers has also contributed to the success of ebooks. Please advance to the next slide. Oops, that's it. That's my reference page. So I enjoyed this today. I appreciate being with you and hope you all had a lovely Thanksgiving. Thank you.